When I opened the bedroom door and saw my stepson holding his member while looking at his cell phone, I couldn't resist the desire that took over me. Follow this stories of betrayal that happened some time ago. It may be difficult for many to understand what led me to make that decision, but I'll tell you all the details so that, in the end, you can draw your own conclusions. My name is Sophia, I'm 39 years old and I've been married to Daniel, who's 45, for almost 10 years. Our life, from the outside, seems perfect. We have a house in San Diego, a coastal city in California that shines with its stunning beaches. Daniel worked as a sales representative and was always traveling. In addition, he drove Uber on the weekends, focused on making money. He was almost never home, and I was always getting involved with other people, because this void was so great inside me. Daniel has a son from his first marriage, Ethan, a 20-year-old with a strong posture and a striking presence. When I first met Ethan, he seemed distant. We were never that close, which always gave me the feeling that he saw me as an intruder in his father's life. I never imagined that, at some point, things would change. To help you understand better, Ethan was looking for a job after losing his old one, where he worked as an administrative assistant, and asked to stay with us for a while to cool off. Daniel, of course, accepted immediately. Ethan had just enrolled in an accounting college, but at that time something seemed to have shaken him, and he no longer had the same pride he used to have. He moved into our house, and so a new dynamic began. At first, everything was very calm. Ethan spent most of the day out, trying to sort out his job search situation, while I continued with my routine at home. But, over time I realized that something could happen. His presence became more intense as the days went by. I began to notice that he looked at me differently, not as a stepson, but as a man. I tried to ignore it at first, thinking it was all in my head. One night, Daniel was out of town for work, as usual. Ethan and I were having dinner together, a sight that was becoming more and more frequent. The house was quiet, except for the soft sound of the ocean waves that we could hear in the distance. The conversation flowed casually, but there was something in the air. At no point did I picture myself with him. If it had been another guy, I probably would have done something by now. As I was washing the dishes, I felt Ethan's gaze on me. I tried to act natural, but inside I was nervous. The way he was looking at me wasn't a simple gesture of courtesy or familiarity. It was something deeper. Maybe it was loneliness. Maybe it was the fact that I missed Daniel more than I would admit. But that night, something inside me shifted. I turned to get a cloth and dry the dishes, and by accident our eyes met. Ethan smiled discreetly, almost shyly, but his eyes said more than any words. It was at that moment that I felt something different inside me, something forbidden that I should keep only in my mind. I said goodbye to him and went to bed, trying to prevent anything from happening. Lying in my room, with a whirlwind of thoughts, I couldn't sleep well. The images of the conversation with Ethan, and especially the way he looked at me, kept repeating in my head. A mixture of guilt and curiosity took over me. I tried to justify to myself that it was just a look, that I was exaggerating, but the desire to try to get closer consumed me. Needy and with an inexplicable desire, the days that followed were like tests. Every time Ethan and I were alone at home, it seemed like the atmosphere between us grew more tense. It wasn't just about small talk or casual moments. There was something unspoken in the air, a silent attraction that grew with each passing day. I found myself paying more attention to what he did, observing his actions, his calm manner, his firm posture. I knew it was wrong, but other moments, closer to home, were about to arrive. One afternoon, Daniel, my husband, was still out working, as usual, and Ethan came home early. The weather was warm, with that typical summer sun in San Diego. The house was silent, and I was on the porch enjoying the sea breeze. He came over and sat next to me, as if it was something completely natural. The conversation started out light, about the job he was trying to get, but gradually changed tone. "You know, Sophia, I wanted to thank you for everything you've done for me. Not everyone would have the patience you've had," he said with that shy but confident smile that was already disarming me. "Ethan, you don't need to thank me. We're family," I replied, trying to keep my tone formal, even though inside I felt like the conversation was going somewhere unexpected. He looked at me deeply, and that look froze me for a moment. It was as if he knew exactly what was going on inside me. I tried to look away, getting up to go into the house, but before I could take another step, I felt his hand on my arm, lightly, almost as if apologizing for being so forward. But there was nothing abrupt about his gesture. It was soft, full of unspoken intentions. "Sophia, sometimes I think we don't choose what we feel," Ethan said, his voice low, almost a whisper. I turned to him, my heart racing, feeling a confusion of emotions. It was as if that familiar barrier between us was finally crumbling. I knew I should get out of there, that this was wrong, but at the same time there was a part of me that wanted to find out how far this could go. But I held myself back, smiling at him. The afternoon was falling, the sky was beginning to change color, the orange of the sunset painting the clouds. Everything seemed to conspire for that moment. The silence between us was broken only by the sound of the wind and the sea in the distance. The heat of that afternoon seemed to have gone to my head. I felt unable to deal with the mix of emotions that Ethan had awakened in me. He, on the other hand, seemed calmer, but his eyes, those eyes that challenged me, were inviting me to something unusual. "Ethan, I think you should." I couldn't finish. The truth is that I didn't know what to say. He remained silent, just waiting, full of expectations. We knew we were about to cross a line from which we could never return. I walked away, entering the house, trying to maintain my composure, but I felt that each step I took was harder than the last. He followed me, but without rushing towards the living room to watch television, as if he was giving me time to think, to reflect on what I really wanted. Meanwhile, I went to the kitchen to do my wifely duties, without knowing that night, a desire would be born in me. This time, it would be a dangerous touch. When night came, my husband Daniel had arrived very late and tired. He had dinner, talked a little with Ethan, and went to bed to sleep. After everyone was asleep, I simply couldn't stop thinking about what had been happening. The stifling summer heat and the soft sound of the wind coming through the open windows seemed to intensify everything I felt. Lying next to my husband, my thoughts were far away. He was sleeping soundly, oblivious to the turmoil I was experiencing inside. My hands were sweating as I got up from the bed, trying to be as silent as possible. The wooden floor creaked softly beneath my feet, but I kept going, without looking back. My feet took me to the door of Ethan's room, as if they already knew the way. The house was plunged into almost complete darkness, illuminated only by the pale moonlight that filtered through the cracks in the curtains. The hallway seemed long, and each step brought me more doubts, but also a desire that I could no longer control. I stopped in front of his door, my hands trembling on the doorknob, and for a moment I thought about going back to my room, as if none of this was happening. But when I touched the doorknob, my racing heart and shallow breathing made one thing clear to me. I was no longer in control. I opened the door slowly, the wood creaking slightly. Inside the room, the moonlight came in through the windows, creating soft shadows, and to my great surprise, Ethan was looking at his cell phone screen, with his hand on his cock. I watched from a distance so he wouldn't notice, while an intense heat took over me. At that moment, he looked at me softly, calling me to come in. I couldn't resist. I went towards his cock and asked him to turn off the phone and live that reality with me. I knew my husband wouldn't wake up, he was so tired, and I stayed there all night, naked and giving myself over to pleasure, on the 20-centimeter tool. That man, full of energy, didn't have much experience, but he had a strength and agility that made up for it, and I guided him on the correct movements, while he explored every curve of my body. After we finished, my legs were shaking with so much satisfaction. The next day, very early, my husband Daniel went out again, and I repeated the same thing all day. Already tired, Ethan received a phone call in the afternoon with a job offer. He answered, and they set up an appointment for 5 p.m. He hung up the phone and then I stayed by his side, allowing him to finish on a high note. When we finished in the afternoon, close to his departure time, he said goodbye, saying he would be leaving in a few days, so that no one would suspect anything. I said goodbye and told him that, whenever he wanted, the door would be open for him. He was the safe contact I had when I wanted. That was Sophia's story. Did you like this story? If so, leave a comment telling us what you thought, and, if you've experienced something similar, share it with us. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss any new content. Here, we always bring life stories, reflections and real experiences, all with great sincerity. Thank you for watching until the end and for being part of this journey. See you in the next video.